We are filming interviews with America's greatest jazz men for the Hamilton College Jazz Archives. And we are blessed today to have two fabulous musicians from a newly formed group called the Statesmen of Jazz, Bill Berry and Buster Cooper. Pleased to have you, gentlemen.
My pleasure.
Yes. Tell us how you got started playing the trumpet.
Well, let's see. How I got started. Well, I always wanted to play. Actually, I wanted to play trombone, but Buster got that instead. But I pestered my folks until they bought me a horn for Christmas one year, and I've been playing the thing ever since.
How was the music in the school systems? Did that help?
Well, I had a very good music teacher in high school, but my parents were also musicians.
Ah.
So.
And how about yourself on the trombone?
Well,
what led you to the trombone?
Pardon?
What led you to the trombone?
Well, I've been trying to figure it out for a long time now. Anyway, so what happened was I started off on drums first because my cousin, he used to play with Erskine Hawkins' band, you know, it's way before your time. Yeah. And so, I mean, he idolized him. He used to come on with all different kind of stories. I mean, because he went to Bama State in Alabama, you know. So he used to come back off the road and, you know, tell the good times he had, and we met and this and that, you know. And I always did idolize him, you know, secretly anyway, you know. And so, well, I mean, actually I got hung up on baseball first. You know. I wanted to be a baseball player like all American boys, you know. You understand what I'm saying? And then my brother, he started playing trumpet. So I went to the music shop with my dad one time to pick up my brother's trumpet, you know. So I saw the trombone, so the rest is history, you know. So he bought it for me then, you know, my dad did. You know, so I've been, you know, still trying to learn the darn thing, you know, but yet still, you know, really something else.
Yeah, well, that's one of the great parts about music is you never learn, you never know it all. You know, there's
right.
always, every day, something that you learn.
Yeah. I practice 4 and 5 hours a day sometimes. You know. Every day. I mean, I try to practice every day naturally, even on like the road. You know, you have to. I mean, it's an old saying. I mean, but it's the true saying. If you miss a day, okay, now you can tell it, and if you miss another day, but your teacher can tell it, and if you miss another, boy, the audience can tell it.
That's the truth.
So I mean, that's just the way it goes. You know? Yeah.
Yeah, those things, you know, you never, not only you never learn it, but you never got it down perfect either, ever.
Yeah.
And every time you pick the thing up is a challenge.
That's right.
You know.
Because that's why you hardly ever hear of a professional musician retiring. Never. You know, because always kind of grasp for that, you know, particular sound or that goal, you know, whatever it might be, you know. You understand?
And then in jazz, there are so many parameters that you have to bring under your personal control, because when you solo, you have to say it all.
Well, actually, you know, I mean, that's one great thing about improvisation. When you're there taking like a solo, okay, you're standing on your feet composing, but it might look easy to the average person, but it's not that way. In other words, to make a long story short, you have to have a little bit of smarts in order to play an instrument.
You know, there were people in the early days of jazz that used to think that jazz musicians were just, I don't know what they thought, were in some type of a trance or something or whatever. Every jazz musician that can take 2 courses over a 32-bar form is a theoretician.
Exactly. I agree to that. I love that term too. Yeah.
Tell us some of the early bands that you played with. How you got your start professionally?
Well, I started my cousin's big band. I mean, after he came back. Well, first, I was born and raised like in St. Petersburg, Florida, you know. And then I went to high school system, you know, the same thing, just high school, teaching a high school band, stuff like that. And my cousin had a 16-piece band, you know. So naturally, you know, blood is thick in the water, so he didn't ease in that some kind of way, you know. You know. So after I finished high school, like in St. Petersburg, I went to New York, you know. And my first big band was Lyle Hampton's band, you know. And they had, within that band, they had Clifford Brown, Art Farmer, and like Quincy Jones. And it was like big names, you know. I mean, it's big names now, you know, nowadays. And guys like Benny Golson, Alan Dawson, Mark Montgomery, Wes Montgomery's brother, you know. And it was a fine band, but we weren't making no money, but the show was swinging. You understand what I'm saying?
Well, nobody on Ham's band ever made any money.
The show was swinging, but I mean, and at the time, so Quincy Jones, he was about 16 years old, you know. I mean, but he always did, you know, he always did, well, I just use the term, you know, take care of business. He was always stepping, you know, and he's still stepping for as I'm concerned, you know, as far as Quincy Jones goes, you know, because that's his thing, you know. And he was a fabulous musician, and is a fabulous musician, I should say. But he's doing a lot of producing now, you know, different TV shows and everything else.
Movie scores.
Yeah, exactly. That's something.
Tell us one of your early bands.
Oh, well, when I got out of high school, they used to have what they called territory bands. Which meant just what it sounds like. They were bands that only worked a certain small area, maybe 1 or 2 states, period. And there were so many ballrooms in those days that these bands literally worked 6 nights a week, and you didn't repeat yourself for 6 months. You never got back to the same. And this is all like in Iowa and Nebraska, in this case.
Yeah.
And there were dozens of these bands, and they were not very good bands. But they were working all the time, every night. And they used to advertise in Downbeat magazine. They used to have a classified section, and they would say, needed, like first trumpet, third trombone, saxophone, and a telephone number or whatever. That's how I got my first job. I answered an ad in Downbeat.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the territory bands, you know, I don't know if you ever heard of a band by the name of Nat Toes.
Oh, sure. He worked the same office we worked out of, Vic Schrader.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I had just left Florida. You know, it's my first time leaving Florida. This was 1949. And his headquarters was in Omaha, Nebraska.
Right.
You know, so we used to play
Vic Schrader, that was the name of the agency.
Really?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So we used to play places like Bismarck, North Dakota, and all different places like that, you know, around Wyoming and all that kind of stuff.
Were you on that band? Nat Toes?
Yeah, the Nat Toes band. 1949.
Oh, see, that's when I was out there.
No, you're kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. 1949, because Oliver Lesson was the band. Yeah. But anyway, so when I left Florida, man, it was like during the summertime, you know, to make with this band and everything. And all of a sudden I saw something white coming out of the sky, and I'd never seen snow before in my life. You understand what I'm saying? And so I said, hey, wait a minute.
These bands, incidentally, they were what they called sleeper bus bands.
Yeah, that's right.
And
that's right.
they'd take a truck or a bus and convert it with bunks.
Yeah, but sleepers on them.
And boy, were those things funky.
Oh, yeah.
we used to check into a hotel every Monday. That was our day off to take a bath. The rest of the week, you lived in the bus. Period. We never checked in.
Yeah.
Ever, right, Bus?
Oh, absolutely.
And it was here in the wintertime. We had to carry our own drinking water and all. In the wintertime, the water in the bus, the drinking water would freeze. It was so cold in the bus. Yeah. But we lived in the thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my first time ever seen snow. So I mean, I guess I lasted about another week. And I came straight back to Florida. Yeah. Straight back to Florida, man.
Well, they can get some weather out there in Nebraska and Iowa, too.
And Bismarck, North Dakota, places like that, you know. But it was an experience, though, I mean, really.
Yeah, that's exactly what that's exactly what it was, experience.
Yeah.
And now, unfortunately, there's no place to get that experience.
That's right.
You know,
Absolutely.
Now all the kids are going to college because now that they teach jazz in college, okay. But that's not the same thing as being on the road.
That's right.
I want to ask you, I want to follow in on that and ask for some comparisons there, because this music is experiential.
Yes, you have to have something to play about.
And I want you to talk about that because, then I'm going to ask you a little later about some questions about some of the marvelous big bands that you played with. But at that time, you had the University of Basie, the University of Ellington.
Well, that's the top. So you don't start out at the top.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Take us to prep school then.
Were we almost there?
No, but there's something, it's like anything else you do. The more you live, the more experience you get, and the more you know what's going on, hopefully. And that's what that stuff was all about.
Exactly.
They weren't good bands, but they were bands.
Mm-hmm.
And I really feel sorry for the young people now as far as that goes,
Yeah.
because there is no warm-up place like that. There's no place to get that experience.
That's right.
And you can't get out of high school and go straight with Count Basie's band.
Well, I mean, actually, and Billy and I, we had the experience and the feeling of like going to clubs and jamming, like jazz clubs.
That's another
like,
thing.
It's like jamming, and the guys that you sit in, if they're nice, you know what I'm saying, But I mean, but you don't find that nowadays. I mean, okay, they come out of high school, maybe to Berkeley or something like that, But it's nothing like. I mean, in other words, hearing it in the street, I just put it that way. I mean, because that's where jazz comes from, from the streets, I mean, because the blackboard can't talk. I mean, but I'm not putting schools down at all. But I'm some hand-on experiences, It's just fabulous,
I want to ask you another question about this. In a time when there wasn't that much racial mixing, they say that at night after the bands got through, all the players would get together and jam anyhow because they all wanted to play together.
Oh yeah,
Exactly.
Talk to us about how the music made a bridge there.
Well, the business of segregation was never the musician's idea. This was the one thing where you didn't have that happening. Although it was illegal in some places.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely.
Literally illegal.
If you're on the wrong side of town, or anytime, at that time, night or day, and just like the cops, they say, hey, what you doing in this, district, and you like vice versa, if you're not in your neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, they always find a way to merge. It never fails. And musicians, it's not the ethnic thing there, Believe me. You understand what I'm saying? It's not there. And never have been, not among musicians. Out of my experiences.
What does the jam session do that the classroom
Much more
doesn't
experience.
do?
Yes.
Experience with an audience.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Also, like I'm sure Bus the same thing. I used to sit in these joints, and you're playing with people all the time who are better than you are, and that's the only way to learn it. That you go. Like, if you're the best kid in the band, then you're in trouble because there's nobody to learn from.
Yeah.
You should always try to play with people who are better than you are, so that some of that rubs off on you, hopefully.
Yeah.
Jump in over your head?
Amen. Yeah.
In a second.
Sure, swim or sing, well, it's like, in the Bird movie, he goes in, he can't play, they get rid of him, get out of here, right? Well, so go home and practice and then come back later. He sure did.
Yeah, he sure did. Yeah, it's a mess. But actually, I consider myself, and I'm quite sure that Bill feel the same way, that we are very fortunate in order to make a living out in like music, I feel blessed.
Oh, you
understand
and me
what I'm saying?
both, yeah.
Because I would have to say that, it's not that many. It's like a kid, kid with a basketball. You see the kids at the street all the time, And it's like basketball. There's nothing wrong with that. Because it's just determination, like anything else. If you put on blinds and say, hey, I'm gonna be the best musician and the best trumpet player, you're the best basketball player. But the kids, nowadays, it's only about maybe about 12 major league teams, And okay, how many can get on those teams and everything? But we happen to be lucky. We could make a living out of it and still make a living out of it. That's very fortunate.
Talk to us about your work together in the Ellington band. Talk to us about what made that band
Well, I'm gonna let Bill start.
one of the most
that man was
fabulous ensembles that's ever existed.
Exactly, I grant you that.
or the.
Yeah.
Buster can tell you this, corroborator, or anybody else. Everybody from Count Basie on down said I mean, there was no question. Duke was it. He was the champ, and there was never not a question of rivalry or anything like that because Ellington had everything covered hands down. There wasn't even any competition. You know, yeah, it was every musician's
Dream.
favorite. You know,
Exactly.
and the band didn't operate like any other band. I've been on lots and lots of bands. That one didn't operate like any of the other ones at all. I mean, nobody else could even begin to operate like that, right?
No, no.
Like, the guys used to get up in the middle of a tune and go off to make a phone call or get a drink or something. Nobody ever said anything, not a word.
No.
If you did that on anybody else's band, you'd be fired immediately.
Exactly.
You know, you're gonna get up in the middle of a tune and walk
Yes.
off?
Well, one thing I can say about Duke, I mean, he was not a disciplinarian, by no means. You know, he said, well, everybody's men, you know, I mean, and he didn't fire you. And I mean, you know, you get one guy noticed, you know, I mean, but that was the first time I ever seen that. Yeah. But anyway, okay, now what happened to me? I had met him when I was in Paris, you know. I had my group behind the Josephine Baker show, you know, my brother and I at the old Olympic Theater in Paris. So, and it was the band was in town, so they came by to see, you know, the group. And they kind of hit on me then, you know, for coming, you know, with the band, you know. And so when I got back to New York, I was playing spaces, nightclubs around New York, like Count Basie's Club and Small's Paradise, my group, you know. So he called me one time, you know, for a couple of gigs, but I couldn't make them. So he called me for, and it's like one weekend, in order to make, you know, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, you know.
The Red Hill Inn.
Yeah, exactly, you know. So that's where it started, you know. So, but my first night, no, it was about my third night. I was like in the band.
The first night.
First night.
The first night we were upstate New York somewhere.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And Nicky had a wreck.
We had a head-on collision. Buster's first night.
That's my first night. Remember that, Betty?
Yeah, my wife Betty got hurt.
Yeah.
And, you know,
That's
and
something.
several of the bus driver really got hurt.
Yeah,
But you know,
and it's like what happened. Okay, now we was on the edge of this cliff, you know, this big,
overlooking the water.
Yeah. And okay, now we had to get a school bus, you know, with the school buses, and just go in like to New York City. And Nicky had to record that morning, get off the bus, and everybody, you know, I mean, hey, you still shook
we
up.
had a bus wreck. We were standing out on the highway for hours. Finally, an old rickety school bus comes and picks us up and drives us straight to the record studio.
Yeah, take us back to the studio.
How can you play
that? Make an album. Yes, that's
don't mess around. Get that bus here. You know, it didn't matter we had a wreck or anything like that.
Yeah.
Go to the record
That's
date
right.
and make the record.
But I can say one thing about Duke. Anytime we was off, if we off for a month, and in the case where you can record for a month, that's the way it seems. Right, Big?
Yes, it seemed like every time we had a day or off or something, we were making another record.
Yeah.
I mean,
Always.
there's still records of Ellington's coming out that I'm on that have never been released
Exactly.
yet. You know, I don't know how many we made. But
Oh man, goodness, really something else.
but you're right. Every time there was a day off, there was a record date.
Yeah, there was something else.
Two
Well, that was his life, you know.
Two tunes. Tell us about these two tunes. Tell us about Take the A Train. Why is that? Why does that? Every time that tune is played, all over the world, anywhere, it has immediate rapport with audiences.
Everybody knows it. Yeah.
And then
The
it don't
introduction.
mean a thing.
The introduction. You don't even have to get into the melody. If you play the piano introduction, everybody starts applauding.
But that's Strayhorn's tune, though, isn't it?
Yeah, yes,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
Billy Strayhorn. Yeah, it's something else.
You know, it's just one of those ones that everybody loves. I don't know why.
Yeah. You talk about perfect collaboration. Well, that's what seems to me like perfect collaboration. You know, an OK Duke and Strayhorn, boy, he had it. Was fantastic. I've seen Duke, you know, he started a tune, so he used to hear straight. He said, I can turn the corner like on this one. He'll fix this for me. You can tell, but you know, just
Or over the phone.
just boom.
Or over the phone. He's Strayhorn, I'm stuck here.
Yeah.
You know, with this, do something with it. And they, you know, the way the stories go, and I'm sure it's true, is, you know, Strayhorn would send something out that was the perfect, like as though they were reading each other's minds.
Exactly.
You know?
Fantastic.
The perfect solution, you know.
Yeah. Really was something else.
Also, Duke Ellington was the, how do you say this? He was the smartest, brightest person I've ever met, period.
Exactly. I used to sit up and watch him at night, man. I was trying to figure him out, you know. I used to be looking at him. I mean, he's always, I didn't wear watching nothing like that because he didn't even know what the time was. That didn't mean nothing. I guess he thought maybe that'd make you rush through the day. You understand what I'm saying? And I used to sit up on the bandstand and I used to just watch him, you know. And I finally came to a conclusion one night. I said, Duke Ellington know who Duke is. Period. Believe me.
He's the only one that knew who he was.
Believe me. He knew who Duke was. He knew what Duke was all you know, like about. Fantastic man. Haven't you seen people, you know, come into a room? If like Duke would walk in this room right now, there would be like something like a halo right around his head.
The room lights up.
Yeah.
You know,
really, it does.
That's very few people like that.
Yeah.
He was one of them.
Just walking in right now, boom, this whole room will go up.
Yes, I was at the White House for his 70th birthday, and there were like not only a bunch of great world famous jazz musicians, but there was the president, the vice president, the cabinet, the Supreme Court, and heaven knows who else.
Mm-hmm.
And the spotlight was on Ellington at all times. I mean, you'd have sworn there was somebody following him around with a light, and there wasn't. You know, I mean, this is in very fast company. You know, the most powerful people in the country, in the world.
But he stood out.
And he was he was the one that, like, who's that with Ellington? Oh, the president. Well, that's the way it was.
That's the truth,
you know?
man. That's the truth. Powerful man. Powerful, man. Powerful. Believe me, powerful.
I'm sorry, Betty's trying to signal me what?
Talk about the band book.
Oh, what band? Well, you know, a big band, they have music, right? Written parts, and they number them and title them so you can find what you're looking for. Not Ellington. The first night that I was with the band, first I had to trade my bow tie to get a bow tie like the band was wearing. That was my uniform. I traded it with some kid in the audience. I said, I'll trade you ties. He said, oh, with Duke Ellington here. And that's how I got my band uniform. But I had a pile of music this big, nothing numbered and nothing titled. And a lot of it would just be like one whole note on a piece of paper. And these were the arrangements. And the trombones were the only ones that had written music.
Yeah.
You know, why that was, I don't know.
But it was kind of weird, too. I mean, actually, because, okay, but my section was cool, you know, I mean, friendly-wise, you know. But, and then like in Bill's section, if he asked anybody anything about where to come in at, they won't tell him nothing.
Well,
Damn, I'm out there by yourself. You know?
well, that's really not true. I mean,
It's not
I've heard
true.
those stories all the time, but no, Cat Anderson saved my life.
Well,
on
that's
that
wonderful.
band,
I'm
you
glad to
know,
hear
because I say one night I said, Cat, what note do I play on the end of this tune? And he says, grab a note that sounds wrong and hold on. Yeah, and he was right. I mean, you know.
Right. Because see, like Bill, I mean, because he was in the band before I came, you know. But anyway, and I was doing some recording with Duke, you know, so all these are his original compositions, you know. So he said, hey, Buster, you know, just take about 2 courses on like this. I said, okay, fine. And I said, where's the chord changes? He said, chord changes? Oh, he said, listen, baby. So that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
You know?
And
no chord
Duke,
changes nowhere.
Duke used to say, we'd be doing a record date and somebody would say, hey, Duke, I think I got a bad note. And he'd say, well, you're a musician, fix it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Well, let's find the right one, sweetie.
Well, when Cootie Williams came back, we played some tune and we got to the end, the last chord, and I played the note I'd been playing for a year, and Cootie looks at me and says, that's my note. I said, okay, I'll find another one. You know, like, all right, you know. I mean, he'd been on the bands before I was born, and he was his note, you know. So I find another one. You know.
But I'm tell you something about that band, though, man. I mean, I have came up with a lot of chill bumps, you know, like a lot of nights. Man, that band will make you just go through the roof, you know, when they want to play. And I mean, they can shower down. They can shower down when they want to play. Fantastic, man. Just get chill bumps, man.
One night, were you with us that night? We were playing in Chicago at some big ballroom inn.
Was it Trenton?
I don't remember where. I don't think it was a Trianon, but the band sounded awful all night, and it was the best band in the world, and also the worst. You know, yin and yang. It'd go this high or this low. You know, and the band had been just nobody gave a damn for the whole evening. And we had about an hour to go or something like that, and somebody looked up, and coming way across the dance floor to the other end of the ballroom is Count Basie's band start wandering in. Well, that did it. You know, they turned the heat up, boy. Like the band, like in one, the next tune, it sounded like the world's greatest band.
Yeah.
And it was.
Yeah.
But they had, you know, that. So, here comes some. Here comes Basie's guys. We'll have to show them how to do it. You know.
Ollie and Frazier.
You know, by the same token, I mean, I've seen us, you know, play, you know, jazz festivals and everything, you know, with the band and everything. Well, and it's like naturally Duke's band always the last one to go on, you know, 9 times out of 10. It's a lot of hanging around, so you get kind of sluggish, you know. And then this Paul gets sluggish more than anybody.
That's what you call it.
So what happened was, and then all the musicians around and everything, and then okay, the band is kind of, you know, tired out now, you know. And the band, I mean, it sounded terrible to me, you know. Okay, the next night, now we got a job, you know, someplace like the Duke Hour at the Elks Rest and go then tear the roof off the place. You understand what I'm saying? And there's nothing but farmers. You understand what I'm saying? You know, so to speak. I said, well, why didn't you use that energy last night? You know what I'm saying? But c'est la vie.
Tell us about your work so far with the Statesmen. Tell us what it means to be in such an elite group and what that means historically for this music.
Well, seeing as I'm the newest and youngest, first of all, I know all these guys for years. So it's like, when you know, it's not like going with a bunch of strangers.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's like a comfortable shoe.
Yeah.
And we all know the same people, we all know the same tunes.
Yeah.
It's an honor to be in that company. In fact, I told Buster, I added up, when I got the call for this job, I added up the ages of everybody, including myself, and divided it by 7. And the average age in this band is 79. Now, that's kind of, and then right after I got this call, I got a call to go conduct a bunch of 16-year-old kids for the President Clinton. And so, you know, from 79 to 16 in 2 days.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
So, and the thing is, though, that they're all, these guys and the 16-year-olds are all trying to do the same thing. They're all trying to make jazz. So, you know, they're all going to the same place, which I think is just great.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
And Benny Waters, he's just fabulous. You know what I mean? I don't hear that vibrato, you know, like a person, I mean, if they play an instrument, you know, 93 years old, nothing like that. I mean, he's very swift. And he's very commanding, and
We were listening.
boom, you know.
We were listening to him this morning while he was playing, and we all said, "Geez, he sounds like Coleman Hawkins,"
Yeah.
and he's would be contemporary.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, he's
Exactly. Yeah, he's something fabulous. That's because he loves what he's doing. So I mean, it'll have to come out. So I mean, it's like anything else, you know. If you love, you know, and keep on sweeping the street, hey, you know, you whistle while you work, you know, you know, so to speak, you know. So that's the way he goes, you know. Just an inner thing like anything else, you know.
Yeah, and the other, you know, the wild part about this music, and one of the wild parts is it has become in the last 20 years, it's no longer just American. It's spread around the whole world.
Oh yeah.
You know, and the people are dead serious about it too. I go to Japan a lot. I have a lot of Japanese friends, musicians, and they, you know, they are just as sincere about it as any American jazz musician. You know, they,
In the audience, especially Japan, man, just sweethearts, man, you have a pin drop, you know, while you're performing. But after you get through, man, it's like the walls coming out the place. You understand? I mean, very, very attentive, you know. And it's like same thing with Europe, you know.
I was going to ask you about your travels in Europe.
Goodness, man, it's just something else, you know. And I'm going to Paris, and it's like December 5th. Yeah, I'll be there for 2 weeks.
Playing
You
a
know.
Meridian?
No, it's a vibe play. I forgot his name. We have a club there. Yeah, I'm doing a singer. You know.
Well, good.
Yeah. But this is American. You know. I don't have to go through that again. Jazz form is was formed here. You know. But it's not very supportive. Like they would do like in Europe. It just seems to me that they support the European culture here at the symphony orchestras other than our own culture. You know.
Well, the way they say that is that because Europe is so much older than America, they have that the continuity of being appreciative of art. I mean, they had art for 1,000 years instead of 200, you know, or 100 in the case of jazz. Plus, I think that one of the reasons jazz is not well liked here in this country is strictly race prejudice. You know, and always was right from the beginning. When I was in college, there was no jazz being taught in any schools.
Oh, no.
High school,
Oh, no.
you know.
No, that was taboo, so to speak. Yeah.
I went to Berkeley when it was brand new. It was a little tiny, you know, just about 3 or 4 rooms. That's all it was. And it was the only school in the country that I knew of that was teaching jazz at that time. Now, it's, you know, all over the country. In fact, I've done a lot of things with kids in Japan and in Europe too. Jazz musicians. So,
I heard you mention the other night that you know Herb Pomeroy, right?
Herb Pomeroy was the teacher at Berkeley when I went there, and
Well, he and I, and it was like Lionel Hampton's
Lionel
band.
Hampton, right.
You know, Jack Crown, the trombone player, Jack Crown?
do I know him?
Yeah.
He just called me.
He called me all the time. And he'd be rip de boom every time he called
every
me.
time.
Yeah.
Betty, he talked to you, right?
And he gets Sarah too, Betty. He gets Sarah every time. I guess about 2 o'clock in the morning. But it's an experience, and I'm gonna give $1 million for it. And actually, I've been, this kind of, all over the world really, and I can afford it on my own. You understand? And I really been to places that I would never dream. Like Afghanistan and Isfahan. And it's like the Dead Sea, the Red Sea, and all that stuff like that. Jerusalem, and so many places. Playing jazz.
This music during the big band era used to be played on the radio.
Oh,
Sometimes
yes,
bands would
absolutely.
have their own radio show.
Oh, definitely.
a lot of them.
They come from different, hotels.
They
and
also,
stuff
but
like
no,
that.
he means like Woody had a half-hour show every Friday night.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, you're like Raymond Scott and all that. Like that.
Yeah, there was a lot of that going on in those days. Yeah.
And the music also, people used to hear this music, and as soon as they set that tempo, or like you said, that intro, people would dance. It evoked a response from them.
Well, at one point, this was the popular music of the day, sort of. It was never really hardcore jazz that was popular, but it was, on the surface it seemed. But yeah, the big band era, hundreds of bands, maybe half a dozen or more, a few more, 10 really good ones. The rest of them were terrible, anyway. but they were all out there working. But 95% of what you would hear on the radio was junk.
The reason why I asked is because when you hear a band come over the radio and you enjoy the music, you can't tell what color they are.
Oh,
no.
God, no.
No, well,
And the other thing is that I wanted to ask the two of you, owing to your experience and participation in the Statesman, is, do you think the music itself has a healing quality in it that can get rid of some of this?
absolutely, no question about it. In fact, it has healing qualities in many ways. You can ask any musician. You got a fever or upset stomach or a cold or anything like that, but you got to go to work, right? You finish playing and you feel, your headache's gone, your cold feels like, you're not sick anymore for a few minutes. You are, of course, but it relieves all of that. It really does,
Exactly. Yeah. And let me tell you another thing too. But I'm quite sure, B feel the same way. As long as I've been playing, And all the places that I have played, you know, I mean, all the big places, and they're like B-set at the White House and stuff like that, and things for kings and queens. And I got a job in my hometown now, because I live in Florida now, you know. And I get queasy stomach, I get nervous before I let go to the job. I still get that feeling. But I want to keep that, you know. I want to keep that feeling, you know. Because anytime I let that feeling go, I say, hey, well, maybe I'm not interested in it.
Well, like, you know, of all people, like the greatest, Ella Fitzgerald was absolutely scared to death every night she had to go on a stage.
Yeah.
Scared to death.
Yeah.
And she was the best.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
That speaks of a certain humility.
Yeah.
And talk to us about that, about the spirituality and staying humble before the music.
Well, okay, well, actually, I don't play the trombone. Okay, Supreme Being played the trombone through me. I am the instrument. You understand what I'm saying? So I mean, I just put that clear now. You understand what I'm saying? But he's a good trombone player, though. So that's good. So he's got chops. Huh? He got chops. Yes, you know, so like a lot of guys, you know, say, well, they say, well, listen, I mean, a certain guy, I mean, because he never called me for a job and everything, you know. So, well, I mean, I got to give it his age just like in the world, you know. You understand? That's the way I see it.
It's easy. It's easy to be humble playing jazz because it never comes out the way you want it to. You know, because that thing is always fighting back at you.
And I hate to hear myself on records.
record?
Oh man, I
don't think anybody.
I could have did this. Why did I do that? I could have did this. You understand what I'm saying?
You're
I
gonna do
said,
that,
wow,
did I
why
do
did I
that
do that? Yeah, something else, man. I just walk around. You know?
I hate
Walk in the studio.
I don't think anybody likes to listen to their own records.
Except down in Washington.
Okay.
In the dressing room, and I used to be in the theater, like the Potter Theater, and all day long between shows, he's playing her records all day long.
Yeah.
You know? But
She wasn't humble though.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about. Yes, that's something else. Yeah.
Talk to us about humor in the music.
Well, that's what it's all about. And I think, you know, one of the greatest humans, you know, and like player to me is camaraderie. It always comes out of him, out of his instruments. You know what I'm saying? He plays cute. You know, I mean, he plays with a little lift, you know, little thing. You know. You know
He's a happy guy.
Yeah.
That's his
And it comes out,
personality.
right?
And most people do play their personalities.
Yeah.
You know.
That's right.
So if you happen to be funny, and there are a lot of musicians who are very funny. They're good joke tellers, and funny things happen to us too. I mean, things that I don't think happen to other people.
Yeah, I'm telling you, that's what it seems.
Share some of those with us. Share
I
a
just
couple
can't pull one out of the air.
No.
You got to remind me
Yeah,
about
yeah.
something.
Yeah.
And, just, you know, terribly funny things happen, funny sayings. I can't tell that one.
I don't think so. That's something else.
No.
But anyway, I mean,
yeah.
or I'll put it this way: if I do the same thing over again, I would do it exactly the same.
Well, when you're traveling with a big band, and say you're on a bus, say Duke Ellington's band, you're on the bus with those 16 guys, whatever. You know, perhaps 12 or more hours a day, every day, for years, right? And you know, you're with them more than you're with your own family. So there better be some humorous things going on. You know, I mean, it's like you're living with people that you know, it's hard enough to live with your own family, let alone 20 other people's families.
Exactly. Yeah.
And some of these guys had been there with that band since before I was born. You know, long before I was born, in fact. Yeah. And so, like any family, they had their squabbles. You know, you can't live with people that intimately 24 hours a day is what it really amounts to.
Yeah.
And half of it in in a bus. I mean, that enclosed quarters where there's no place to go, you know, you just have to pull the shade down beside you, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do we have, gonna have to wrap up because they have to play, but
Yes.
do you have any things maybe about Joe Williams? Was Joe Williams with the Ellington band when you were there?
No, but I've worked a lot with
No.
Joe. He's a dear friend.
We're looking for just a few comments.
Give us a little color on Joe.
Oh, well, Joe is a extremely nice guy and very thoughtful and kind, generous, smart. We were on a ship together a couple of years ago, a cruise ship doing a jazz cruise, and we had, I guess they served, anyway, somehow or other, we found out that we both liked olives stuffed with anchovies, and they're very difficult to get. But Joe had this connection in San Francisco or someplace, so about a week after we got off the ship, the doorbell rings, and there's a guy standing there with a case
Oh, goodness.
anchovy stuffed olives
Really?
for me, you know. So
Oh, you ordered them for you?
Yeah, Joe
Oh,
sent them to
beautiful.
me. You know,
Yeah, that's
not a
nice.
bottle or two, but a case. You know.
Wow.
Well, you know, actually, I mean, okay, now when I first heard about Joe Williams, everybody was talking about this singing, you know, with Count Basie's band. You know, I mean, that, like Birdland, you know. And then at that time, I still am, you know, and I was a big, you know, fan of Black Basie's band. You understand what I'm saying? And so, and then I find myself, you know, okay, now when went to Birdland, I found myself just being oogle-eyed at Joe Williams. I didn't see the trombone players. I didn't even see Sonny Payne or nobody. I'm just like, yeah, the man was fantastic. And as like B said, he's a smart man. I mean, because he didn't have, as because okay, to my knowledge, he have never had a hit record on his own. It's on like every day, you know, and to give up to somebody else, and he's still stepping. You understand what I'm saying? So he must be doing something right.
He's doing something right, all right.
Yeah,
Charisma.
Yeah.
Well, he's just got it. He's, as I said, he's a very nice, gentle guy, you know.
Exactly.
And that comes through. We were talking about you play your personality. That's his personality.
Yeah.
You know, what you hear.
Well, we're going to conclude this interview. It's been fabulous talking to these great musicians from the statesmen of jazz, Buster Cooper and Bill Berry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike.